old.
No, 25 years near 27 years old.
I was going to say.
Also, it was the family business. Dad did it for 34 years. What the heck?
And then Mr. Mize here couldn't get enough, and he's been doing this ever since.
Well, 34 years Dad was in the Army, so today his son went Air Force.
Then he just had to come back out in the blue and then do the historical stuff. So. First, I'd like to welcome you all to Gettysburg and welcome you out here to Pitzer Woods for our Living History Weekend with Battery A, Troop A of the 2nd U.S. Cavalry. The men of the 2nd U.S. Cavalry have been coming here for years to Gettysburg. They've been invited to the park to perform Life of the Civil War Soldier programs. Key word is invite, because we don't have the ability here in the Park Service to do this. Imagine the expense. So we rely on volunteers for our Living History program. These men of the 2nd U.S. have, for years, have chosen a weekend to come to Gettysburg. We've invited them on that weekend. They've spent their own money. They traveled long distance. They gave up whatever weekend they choose when they could be home with their friends and family doing other things to band together to come here to present these programs on the cavalry to you folks. And without the dedication of our volunteers, we couldn't offer any of these programs on any weekend. So since we have a fine representative and their Lieutenant Colonel, David Mize, right in front of us, maybe we can show our appreciation to him and he'll pass it along to the troops.
Yes. Thank you so much for your dedication and time.
What they're going to do for you is talk about and demonstrate the cavalry, the mounted branch. You're going to be introduced to the horses that the men were mounted on. You're going to be introduced to some of the tactics and the weaponry of the cavalry. During the course of the program, they're going to be demonstrating their weapon, the primary weapon, which is the carbine. You'll see them dismounted and so forth, and they'll be firing the carbine, but not live firing. Of course, we don't do that here at the park, but they will be firing blank rounds, about probably 50-60 grains of black powder in those carbines. You combine that with the horses, and it's going to be kind of a little bit loud, so plug your ears up if you have sensitive hearing for the bang that goes off. Also, we like to keep you folks a little separated. Even though the horses are very well trained, whenever you get some horses along with firing of weapons, there could be some problems. Don't anticipate any, but to keep you safe, not only from that black powder, but also from any problems there might occur with that black powder with the horses, just respect this sturdy barricade. You'll be fine. After the program, the men are going to spend a little bit of time out here with you, probably not a lot, but they will certainly invite you back into the shade of Pitzer Woods to answer all your questions on the cavalry. So just don't bolt away after the conclusion out here. They've got a lot of stuff to share with you back into camp. Thanks again, folks, for coming out and supporting these fine groups. We're very fortunate here at Gettysburg. And when you do, when they come in, they certainly make my job with them very stress-free. They also make it very low-key, too. So to introduce you to the role and function of the cavalry, I would like to introduce you to a gentleman who's been coming to Gettysburg with the 2nd U.S., interpreting the U.S. Cavalry for many, many years. He's extremely knowledgeable about the mounted branch, going to share some of that knowledge with you. You heard him, 25 years of service in the United States Air Force, and good friend of mine. I'd like you all to meet Mr. David Mize.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today, which is our pleasure and our privilege, but we wouldn't be here, and neither would you, if it weren't for the efforts of the National Park Service, their employees, which are very rarely actually seen. It's all behind the works, behind the woods. Let's give them a round of applause, shall we? Okay, first things first. This great sturdy barrier that the government spends no expense on. This is my safety briefing. If you see me start running, get out of my way, please. And you might want to try to keep up. Understand, I know if there's an issue going on. You, madam, your job is to make sure nobody walks off with my bugle. My trooper that does that is out of action at the moment. What we're going to be talking about today is drill, and what we'll be showing you is drill. Now, everybody is thinking drill and ceremonies such as we see on parade days. That is not what we're talking about with the cavalry or at that time period. Drill was tactics, as we term them today. This is how a cavalry troop would go to war, maneuver on the battlefield, and how the commander would get them to where they could get their weapons all pointed in the same direction, shooting at the same people, and then have the mobility to move on. Mobility was the beauty of the cavalry. We'll talk more on that. But so that you have an idea of what we're talking about, let's talk weapons. The best armed soldier on the Civil War battlefield was a Federal trooper. The Confederate cavalry did their best, but they all started off behind to begin with. Federal cavalrymen had 4 weapons to choose from. The first was his long-range weapon, long-range being relative. This is a carbine. Note the short barrel, but it's very accurate and deadly out to 150 yards. What he was fighting, though, was infantrymen with weapons that would get out to 350 to 400 yards. But particularly the Federal cavalry had an advantage. Those gentlemen he was fighting against were having to load from the muzzle. To do that, you get about 3 aim shots per minute for a well-trained soldier. Now, you take the Federal, let go, cavalryman, with a breech-loading weapon. Loads from the rear. Paper or linen cartridge, cap, ready to go. 6 aim shots a minute, twice the firepower, and that's 6 aimed shots a minute. If you've got adrenaline pumping, you can get out a lot more than that, trust me. This was shown to advantage just down the road a little bit where Buford's troops stopped a division of Confederate infantry. The big thing was they didn't know they were fighting cavalry. There was so much lead coming their direction, they thought, oh my God, we've got infantry up. Let's deploy against infantry, which means coming out into a long line, about an hour and a half worth of delay. That's what Buford was after, was that delay. There was one drawback to that. When the Federal infantry showed up, the Confederate infantry was deployed for them. There's plus and minuses to this. Any cavalryman's job is to get up close and personal with the enemy. This was another weapon that he did that with. The revolver, in this case a Colt, 1861 and 36 caliber. For people that don't talk calibers, that carbine is it's 52. That's about a ½ inch worth of bullet wide and an ounce worth of lead. The thing with that and this is not so much the speed of the bullet, it's like being hit with a baseball bat all at once. It was the horror of the wounds they caused. They didn't just pierce bone, they shattered it to pieces. Ergo, you have the amputations, etc., and the huge loss rate in the Civil War. Now this was great in the fact that you could fire off, we're not allowed to, darn it, 6 rounds very quickly, as fast as you can thumb the action back and pull the trigger. About 50 yards, accurate, deadly, leaning against a tree, downhill, no wind. But on the back of a moving horse, well, the muzzle control was a little bit different. In fact, one Confederate officer was reputed to have said, "To be sure of your man with a pistol on horseback, you must take the muzzle, press it against his breast, and note the burning hole in his coat." Yeah, I can't get with that. And then there's the weapon that is typical of the cavalry. Now, this is a saber. Anybody here know what defines a saber? Anybody? The curve.
I was going to say the curve of the blade.
That's the typical thought. No, it isn't. Prussians and English of the time loved straight sabers. They really did. It's the fact that it has a single sharpened edge. Aha! But if you can note the back, it's this nice, broad, heavy, which makes a wedge. You got it, an excellent wedge which breaks collarbones and shatters skulls. Even if you don't cut them, you're going to break something. The effectiveness of this weapon was shown in the Mexican-American War, where a bunch of lancers were, and this was the kind of weapon used, a bunch of Mexican lancers were found cleaved from crown to chin. So, not ineffective at all, just archaic. The only problem with this is, that's the range of this weapon. You're a little longer if you're taller than I am. The Confederates had 2 different philosophies about it. Stuart thought everybody should go into the fight with a saber. Everybody else thought they're archaic and they're good for, as Mosby said, roasting a chicken over a fire. But they went to great lengths, the Confederacy did, to equip their troops with the saber. And there's one last horse. They never had one last horse. I just gave it away. One last weapon. 1,000 pounds worth of animal. How many equestrian people, horsey folk, do I have here? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Being run over by a horse is unfun. It really is. The people at the time, all of you, were you to visit the 1860s, the very first thing you would notice, besides the smell, is that there are horses everywhere. That was your powerhouse. And people were familiar with how dangerous horses could be. Samuel Clemens said it was dangerous on the front and the back and uncomfortable in the middle. So, I don't know. I take exception with that, but I understand it. Now let me talk for a second about signaling devices. There's one you see sitting right there. Telegraph was in its infancy. Wireless didn't exist. No radios on the field. So waving banners, waving flags, beating drums, blowing bugles, that was how you told people to do stuff. I'm not a bugler, unfortunately for you. This is probably a good time to plug your ears. But every officer, although a company would have 2 buglers because they were primary targets, shoot a bugler, you killed the signal section. Excuse me. Every officer had to at least know the notes and be able to play them. I'm an officer, so I'll give it a try. You don't see the troop, but they'll hear this. The dying moose call. Now, if they had a bugler with them, I would hear something that goes da 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 da, which is saying we're starting to move. Anybody here seen the movie Gettysburg? Good. The rest of you, shame on you. Go home and do it. In there, you see Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's brother Tom getting one of the guys that's been impressed into their company, and he's talking about Dan Butterfield and preambles. The problem with the bugle is that everybody used it by the end of the war. Both sides used the same playbook, by the way, the same music sheets. So what I just played was drill call. If I had played charge, and a Confederate outfit heard it, and a Union outfit heard it, they'd both go, guess that was us, so you had a fight on. Well, that wasn't the idea, but okay. There's another signaling device. Note, the first thing you saw was not the head of the troopers over the bean field, but the guide-on. The guide-on is a French term for a guide-on. It's something to guide on. I love that. It's one French term I understand. It is not a flag, although it looks like the United States colors. A cavalry company was not authorized to carry U.S. colors. That's because if you lose that flag, that's bad on you. You lose a guide-on, that's operational hazard. Get another one. The troopers are advancing in what is called advanced carbine. Yes, this is a very archaic way to wear a carbine. It's even more comfortable if you're trotting to use that. Excuse me for turning my back on you for a moment.
Gary Darby.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the 2nd United States Cavalry, Company A, along with the 11th and 17th Pennsylvania Augmentees, ably commanded by Captain Scott Womack and ably assisted by Sergeant Terry Cruz. Ladies and gentlemen, we will demonstrate for you now. Carry on, Captain. The first thing we'll show you is 2 formations. The first formation is a traveling formation.
By file to the left. March.
They're going by file. So, one behind the other, one deep. This is a great maneuver for moving through broken terrain, through woods. Say like much of what you would find in the South. But you can probably see one of the issues with it. It takes a long time to get people over a whole outfit over one piece of ground doing a file. Also, you're very vulnerable. There's not much you can do on one side. You can shoot to the right, it's hard to shoot to the left, you can't cover forward and back. If I were a Confederate cavalry officer, and I have been upon occasion, I would love to find this formation trooping through my area. And I do not compete with buses. If you get down, you can actually find out what's going on. Okay, Sergeant Cruz is setting them up to show you different changes in the formation. Officers and non-commissioned officers in the Civil War And since then too, we're graded on how rapidly they can move from a traveling formation to a larger traveling formation to a smaller one, or into a combat formation, the line, which you will see in a little bit.
March!
His command, he's making twos, and he's told them he wants them to hurry up, trot, don't walk. That doesn't mean he's going to change his gait. That means everybody else needs to come to conform to him.
Ready to move!
The term about means 180 degrees. We're going to go back the other way. Now please note, the horses are not just wandering in a half circle. They're actually pivoting where the horse in front of them pivoted. This is not the horse's choice. This is the rider's choice. Horses like to go where they want to go, when they want to go, with who they want to go, at the speed they want to go at. We have to make them do unnatural acts like go where we want them to go, when we want them to go, next to who we want them to ride with, and at the speed we want them to ride with. Another about. I hope, I don't mean to be rude, but I keep checking to see what they're doing because the horses tend to eat the scripts rather than read them. One maneuver they have, which is a very subtle thing, is called an oblique. It's 22.5 degrees, and everybody does it at once. Essentially, you put your knee in the other trooper's knee. That's it. The whole idea being, rather than come up on an obstacle and make several maneuvers and take additional time, you just sidle everybody to one side until you're past that obstacle, and then come back. Like I said, if you want to get down and measure with calipers 22.5 degrees, be our guest. If you get trampled, I'm sorry about that. Please note the gaudy, bright color of the horse. Everybody's going, what? Exactly. Federal cavalry mounts were supposed to be of hardy colors. What that means is solid. There were white horses. The technical term for a white horse in the Civil War was target. I started this on a white horse, I know. Note the captain and the guidon. The guidon is moving because the captain is going to tell these folks where he wants them next. Ladies and gentlemen, they cannot hear me, which is probably why I still have two good knees. But what they can hear is you applauding. If you think they're doing something well, let them know. For one thing, the horses understand that. They don't know why. But when humans put their hands together, they get carrots. Hey, wow, that's cool. It must be carrots. The toughest maneuver we do will be the one when we go into line. You'll move them up, and you'll probably hear, who here has seen a John Ford cavalry movie? Many times. Okay, some of it is not quite accurate, but one thing you will always hear is the term front into line. And that means, all right, we are changing now from a traveling formation. We've spotted the enemy, or we think we have, and we're moving forward into a combat line.
Left! Turn!
Note the accuracy of the turn. One of the maneuvers we'll do today is called a wheel. And the wheel is a very intricate maneuver in that the person on the outside of this maneuver never changes his gait. The person on the inside, the pivot point, can go from taking his horse at a full flat gallop to backing it up in a matter of seconds. To keep this is a solid line swinging like a barn door. Doing it at the walk is not too bad. Doing it at the gallop is painful in the extreme. What you're seeing out there is 12 to 13 troopers. Try to imagine a company of 100 folks. Wow. Also, if you can try to imagine, this is nice and quiet. If we were standing this close to 100 horses, we'd be doing this because the ground tends to shake. Especially when they crack up into a gallop. Excuse me. One of the nice things is being out there rather than down here is up on horseback, there's a breeze. We'll also be demonstrating skirmish from the saddle and dismounted skirmish. By the time of the Civil War, certainly by 1863, this, not the saber, was the primary weapon of the Federal Cavalry. They fought dismounted on a regular basis and they were very good at it, and we'll show you why.
Left wheel!
This is a wheel.
March!
they're doing well, let them know. They appreciate it. If you think they're doing bad, booing and hissing, remember they're armed. The federal government did buy white horses. They tended to let those out to musicians and officers who wanted to be seen. Why you would want to be seen with a weapon that's out to 400 yards, I have no idea. But I like to quote from an earlier war, where Wellington was sitting on one hill at Waterloo and he saw Napoleon on the other on his white horse. And one of his staff said, "Sir, perhaps you should ride a white horse?" Copenhagen wasn't. And he says, "I don't need a white horse to puff me up, by God." And of course, we're talking about the victor. You notice the dark blue uniforms with the gaudy yellow on it, just like my straps. It indicates cavalry. It is not a dress uniform. It is a field uniform at the time. Camouflage was not a great concern. Being able to tell the enemy was. Now they're going to ask me, were we not doing well because we haven't heard squat on the ground? Come on, get with it. Woo! Next time they come riding by, particularly if they're to trot, listen to how stealthy we are. Clang, bang, rattle, trot. Yeah, you bet. Horses were nothing in the way of stealth. Now, of course, Captain Womack, being both a very experienced and very wise officer, has turned the drill over to his sergeant. There are two commands to start off with draw. One is draw pistol, the other is draw saber. It's a good idea to know what's coming if you're in the ranks because you can't see the fellow who's making the command. They are standing out in skirmish formation. Yes, by the way, there is a reason the pistol was cut backwards or cut forward. It has to do with the limitations of your shoulder. You try to pull the 7.5-inch barrel out, otherwise it doesn't work. But this is quite simple. They in fact will set up to shoot. We are not allowed to shoot off horseback here, so they won't. But please note, once they're in line and get ready to shoot, they'll move their horse off to one side or the other a little bit. That's because shooting over horses' ears is a bad idea.
What weapon are they firing? The pistol?
Most of them have Colts, which was the issue weapon for the 2nd U.S. Some have Remingtons. That's about all that's out there. There were different models. Know that the 2nd U.S. Cavalry had been the 2nd U.S. Dragoons before that. It's the longest serving outfit in the United States Army. It still exists as a striker brigade, just back in Afghanistan. Notice that they're going where the guidon is. There's no question of where they're going to reform. They can see where they're going to reform. Now, if I'm a Confederate soldier, who do you think I'm going to pick off first? And in fact, the same with the color details.
Return!
The casualties among guidon bearers are pretty high. However, that is not just a toy. We have at least one instance where somebody lowered the lance and took a Confederate cavalryman out of the saddle with it. Prepare to dismount and fight on foot. This, by the way, is the primary action mode for the Federal Cavalry. Now, we like to say that the Federal Cavalrymen had to be more intelligent than Federal Infantry. Infantry counted off by 2s, a file of 1, 2. Cavalry counted off by 4s, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have to know higher math. On top of which, the beauty of the mobility of the cavalry is that 4th trooper that you see sitting on his horse holding 3 other horses. He can hold 4 and even 5 in a pinch, depending on how much firepower is needed on the line. But the fact is, the troopers have taken those horses, the cavalry's mobility, back out of range. So now you have the line as the only one that's actually engaging the enemy. And very quickly, if they looks like they'll be overwhelmed, or the commander decides they need to be someplace else in the battlefield, the horses can be brought up, the troopers remounted, and they can move in a hurry. Remember what I said, the officers and NCOs were graded on how well they could do this kind of maneuver. Please understand, most of us are not that young and spry and it's hot out here. And this is the 4th time this weekend we'll have done this. So speed is not all that great. Please note some guys are tapping the butts of their carbines on the ground. This is a problem simply with blank charges. We are limited to what we can demonstrate. Thinking of a half or an ounce of lead, a half inch across going down range, yeah, probably a bad idea if you're down
Single
on the
fire
other
from the
monuments.
right. Aim. Fire.
Man with the stripes is your fire control of the day. He's saying where to shoot, when to shoot, and in what order to shoot. Volley fire, everybody's putting the rounds down range at once. You can also choose different modes. One that he will demonstrate, I hope, will be a fire by rank. In other words, he'll have one rank retire while the other rank covers the retiring troopers. This works well if you have, well, particularly Confederate cavalry at the other end saying, aha. They're now falling back to get on their horses, which is, of course, the most vulnerable time. Let's go right across the field, except there's one rank left that's loaded. Now, what you see out there is 7 to 8 gentlemen shooting rifles.
Fire.
Try to imagine several thousand early in the morning. The wet wool is steaming, the body is steaming, the horses are steaming, and you have great clouds of roiling smoke. The term fog of war comes leaping to mind for them.
Rear rank only. Only fire.
Firing by rank.
Aim. Fire. Rear rank. Remount.
And there we go. The rear rank is going to go back. The horse holders will bring the horses up. Note that the horse holder stays in the vicinity. He doesn't just go riding for the guidon. The whole idea there is to help a trooper up who may be wounded, who needs some help, or to keep a restive horse from going ballistic. Also, some of them will pull pistol and stand by, particularly if they see that there's a threat developing at the other end of the field.
Front rank. Single fire from the right. Aim. Fire.
Once you have guys up on horseback with weapons drawn,
Front rank. Remount.
the sergeant feels comfortable enough he can pull that first rank back and disengage. Once again, either he's thinking about being overwhelmed, or they're going someplace else, or they're getting up to mount to go to the other end at a high speed. We'll be doing a charge for you. In fact, we'll do two. And before we do that, yes, by the way, it is correct to hook up the saber backwards when you're on the ground, because the curve goes with your leg and makes it easier to walk. People often ask, why do you take this 36-inch butcher knife and charge downfield, the front rank, by the way, with the thing upside down? In fact, it is not. Think about physics, folks. This is the part that's sharp. The curve goes down like this, and watch what this basket guard does to me. As I move forward, I'm going to try to take this through somebody's chest or throat. Doing that, the curve naturally pushes down through the body, doing the maximum amount of damage. At the same time, I'm rotating the blade, not to do the damage, but to loosen it up from the flesh, and I can roll it off my wrist. Pull it out. If I were to do this, it's going to go like yay, and I wound up with a broken wrist, maybe a broken arm, and probably on the ground wondering, what am I doing down here? So it was grisly, but effective. Okay. Charge. You might hear them yell as dragoons. Remember, they were dragoons before they became cavalry 2 weeks after Manassas. It was a great tradition. What it told the other side is, we're not amateurs. We've been doing this for a long time. You might want to get out of our way. Okay. Left to right.
Forward! Forward!
Some of you might have been expecting to hear the no, that's 1885, folks. The charge of the Civil War was one note, played at various pitches 13 times. It's pretty simple. You don't wind up with chipped teeth. One more charge directly at the crowd, so hang in there. You might actually feel the earth move. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2nd United States Cavalry, Company A, along with the 11th and 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry, elements thereof, at your service.
Carry! Favor! Return! Favor!
The troop will deploy in skirmish order at the line. Please, ask questions as you wish, but remember, we're not going to be here all that long. It's hot. However, back there in the shade, we have a camp. Please join us back there and ask your questions then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us at Gettysburg.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Skirmish to the left and right. Thanks to meet the crowd.
Thank you all so much.
Oh, our pleasure.
You are the reason.